Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
Welcome back to Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast. In this episode, we speak with Darcy Weir about his upcoming documentary, Volcanic UFO Mysteries. He goes into detail about the phenomena surrounding UFOs and their connection to volcanoes and electromagnetic energy. He also talks a lot about Project Blue Book and what differs from the show and real life. There's a lot of great information here, so check it out. And if you're into it, be sure to check out the other episodes we have with Darcy as well. Enjoy!
Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
I don't know if you've seen Project Blue Book, but when you do watch different projects like that are obviously fiction based in science, is it easy for you to kind of easier for you to pull apart the things because you're familiar with processing these things and looking through different answers?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that show on History Channel, a lot of it is documented. These are real events that came up in the Blue Book study, and the Blue Book, Project Blue Book, was a government-funded study that Dr. J. Allen Hynek took part in. And even at the end of the book, they concluded that a high percentage, well, not a high, a low percentage of those reports could not be explained, right? When you watch that show, they dramatize much of it and make it more into a X-Files type account, right? Where there's possibly a man in black, supernatural man in black observer and manipulator that's kind of walking along this timeline of Project Blue Book investigations. But I think what they're actually alluding to with that man in black fictional character is that there is a very credible men in black type cover up that's been going on with the military industrial complex for years, since the 1940s, since the Roswell crash in the late 1940s, where you can look back and this has actually been published in newspapers that they recovered a flying saucer. The U.S. Air Force did. But then the further publications that came out said, no, there's no flying saucer, and the story changed. And that was the first sign of what we would call a cover-up. And the man in black represents a cover-up. The man in black represents a shadowy, clandestine sort of secret service that's protecting the truth, that's keeping the truth from actually entering the minds of the masses and not letting critical details get out about those. I do believe in men in black sightings and encounters over the years as well, like real intervention that has happened. Sometimes it's actually Air Force personnel that show up at civilians' doors and say, stop talking. Other times it has been plainclothes, black suited individuals that say that they represent, some kind of government organization, but they don't have a badge or say where they really come from. And there's been stories of sort of a more supernatural type humanoid showing up to debrief some of these experiencers and shake them down, make sure that they know they shouldn't talk to the press and stuff about what they've seen. I have one that features Stephen Bassett coming out the 15th of January. And that's called Volcanic UFO Mysteries. And it's all about basically UFO sightings that have happened throughout history at active volcano sites. And there's been quite a few in Latin America, believe it or not. We have all the videos included in that documentary. And then Stephen Bassett, his sort of angle is he's talking about UFO disclosure and what UFOs, really mean in terms of historic events.
When it comes to UFOs, I think it's interesting because unidentified flying objects doesn't necessarily mean that it's something from outer space, but I think a lot of people, when they think of UFO, they automatically think of extraterrestrial. But you focus on more terrestrial things like Sasquatch, and you had mentioned like volcanic things. So I'm curious about like, what are your thoughts on things here that can't be explained, that may not involve something from another planet or outside of our solar system?
So I still think that many of the UFO sightings that have happened around volcanic active sites in Latin America, for example, in this documentary, which is coming out on January 15th, those events would not seem to be terrestrial to me. Not a craft that we would know of in our current public-facing military arsenal, I'd say. From what I gather, those are probably something extraterrestrial. These things have been seen going into ash clouds, hovering in and out, kind of like landing inside of volcanic craters while they're active. There's nothing that we have that we operate out of our arsenal aircraft that can do that. So I would say that that's definitely something that would seem extraterrestrial. If we're to believe that there's a intelligence from outer space that is coming to observe our planet and observe certain things happening on our planet, whether that's been nuclear bomb tests in the 1940s and 50s, which is really when the UFO wave picked up, and wars that are happening around the world. They're observing our advancement in technology. They're observing our exploits into space. There's lots of video evidence of UFOs being caught on space cameras around our planet, believe it or not. And then right down to volcanic, active volcano sites, for whatever reason, some people say that they may be siphoning energy from them, from the volcanoes themselves. I know for a fact that it's been proposed that UFOs are attracted to electrical storms. And there's many NASA videos that have been released over the years. For example, on the space shuttle mission STS-80, if you look it up on YouTube, you can find STS-80 has plenty of UFO videos that NASA shot with their own space cameras, looking down in ultraviolet light spectrum down on lightning storms that are happening. You could see the clouds, you could see flashes of light, shooting off in the storms. And then all of a sudden you see these sort of circular objects culminate and surround these lightning storms. And Some folks theorize that maybe they're attracted to electromagnetic activity that's happening in our orbit, in the atmosphere. So volcanoes are also incredibly electromagnetic charged phenomenon. You see lightning bolts shoot off from some of the ash clouds when they're erupting. And for some reason, there's also many UFO sightings that have happened around these active volcanic storms that are happening. Some people theorize that they're might be coming to siphon energy so that those volcanoes may not become as catastrophic and be of a huge loss of life to human beings living around them. I don't know. That's an interesting theory. But, back to your question, do UFOs come from outer space only? I think that there's been a pretty active backward engineering program with the military industrial complex since the 1940s, when they supposedly first captured some craft. And, there's folks like Bob Lazar that said they worked on secret projects that were totally purposed around backwards engineering some of the technology that they found, and that being of actual crafts that were in the hands of the military industrial complex. So I think some of the craft we see possibly could be black budget, reverse engineered terrestrial craft that we just don't know about. And we probably will, it's possible if there is a disclosure event that happens from the American government, it's very possible that part of the disclosure that comes also includes the release of new known military equipment that is capable of things we couldn't imagine of before. But they're trying to say, some of this stuff is ours, some of this other stuff is not. I'm hoping that is what happens in the eventual disclosure as things get closer and closer to a full disclosure of some sort. And maybe Stephen Bassett can shed some light on that.
Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear from you. So make sure to follow us and hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Literary Joe. You can also find Lexi at Darth Lexi with 2 I's, and you can find Nick at Comic Brooks. For those avid readers out there, be sure to check out the articles on comicbookmovie.com for the written transcript and other cool images. Thanks again.
Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast.